Hi, welcome once again to our session on strategic case study. It's going to be an interesting session today. We'll be tackling a whole lot of important topics when it comes to the strategic case study. So please stick and stay with me. First of all, if you haven't subscribed to our channel, please do so. For all your ICA, ACCA videos, and even CIMA lectures, if you subscribe to our channel, you would have all the lectures posted here free of charge. So you need to just hit the subscribe button and hit the notification bell so that anytime I post a video, you will be the very first person to receive it. Isn't that cool? Very, very cool. On social media too, you can follow us on social media. On Facebook, we are Pinnacle Professional College. If you search for us, you definitely see us. On Instagram as well, we are Pinnacle Professional College, which is like, you can see us on Instagram as well. This is how our pages look like, just so you know what to expect when you see our page. Very, very important. Now let's dive into today's objectives. Today we'll be talking about the organizational culture and the cultural web model. We'll be talking about organizational structures, how to evaluate strategic performance and managing change if we have some time, right? So let's start with organizational culture and the cultural web. Now, what is culture? What is culture? Culture can be a difficult concept to understand. And one well-known model for understanding culture or processing the issue of culture within an organization is what we call the cultural web model. It's a web, a web shows that this is an intricate design of the characteristics that exist in an organization. And this cultural web model was designed by Johnson and Scholes in 1992. So what's Johnson and Scholes? What's the argument here? They argue that the culture within an organization, culture refers to the convictions and assumptions of the people within an organization, and it can be defined by 6 elements. That's the key thing I need you to know. That's why it's a web, right? The way you see different parts of a web, a spider web, he's saying that there are 6 elements to this web. And these affect the way people within an organization interact with each other. Culture impacts interaction. It impacts the way we do things and our attitude towards the outside world, right? So there's a way an American, because of their culture, might relate to another person. Culture affects the way we interact with each other. That's very, very important to note. Now, so what are these elements Johnson and Scholes are talking about? It says there are 6 elements. There are 6 elements, which is stories, symbols, power structure, organizational structure, control systems, and rituals. Very, very important. Very, very important. And there's an acronym I usually use to remember this, right? In case you want to remember this easily. I remember this using COP, which is control systems, organizational structure, and power structure. RSS, which is rituals, symbols, and stories. So if it helps you, you can use that. COP, which is cop, a police cop, and RSS. So COP, RSS. Now let's start with the first on the list. Stories. So stories these are events that have happened in the organization in the past that are being retold amongst employees. Sometimes you go to an organization, there are certain stories that have happened way back, and these stories are being relived moment to moment. That's very, very important. That's very, very important to understand, right? So that's something you should keep at the back of your mind. Then you have symbols. Symbols are basically visible expressions of the organization. Visible expressions of the organization that its employees identify with and associate with what the organization is all about. So these are things like the company logo, the dress code. These are symbols. Symbols are visible expressions. So there are certain organizations, when you see their logo, you know that, oh, it's this organization. You know what I'm talking about, right? When you see their dress code, you can tell that, oh, it's this from this organization. Then let's talk about power structure. Power structure. The most powerful, these are the most powerful and influential people within an organization. And they have the biggest influence on collective assumptions and ideas. You know, the most powerful people in any organization will have an impact on or influence on the ideas in a company or in an organization. So that's the power structure. The power structure, talking about the influential people in the organization. Then also, let's move on to organizational structure. This is the aspect of culture, you know, which refers to, you know, basically how an organization is set up or organized. That's why we call it organizational structure. It can be a hierarchical structure, you know, and the way different people along this hierarchy interact with each other or interact with other people in the organization, right? So when you talk about organizational structure, it's just the setup, how the organization is set up. So that's why organizational structures can be drawn on a paper, right? So you see the CEO, you see the deputy managing director, you see the management team, you see employees, the structure, how the organization is set up to run. Then let's talk about control systems. So there are various systems within the organization, such as quality systems and reward systems, and they affect the culture. You know, quality and reward systems. When it comes to reward, rewards change or impact the culture. Reward is all about incentivization. And so that changes the way people do things in the organization. So, for example, if you tell people that if they come early to work, you give them, at the end of the month, you give them 100 Ghana. You see that if you do it continuously, that will change the culture or change the lateness culture because people respond to rewards. They have rituals. These are events or routines that take place that really matter to the people involved in them. So a typical example would be, Tuesday morning meetings that happens every week, or Tuesday morning meetings that happen every month. That's a ritual. It's an event or a routine. Now, since we are talking about culture and other things, what about virtual organizations? Does culture have a place in virtual organizations? So first of all, we need to understand what a virtual organization is. So the virtual company organization does not have an identifiable physical existence. So you don't see any head office or operational premises, and sometimes it might not necessarily have a lot of employees. Yeah. So how does this virtual organization operate? It is operated by means of IT systems and communication networks. IT systems and communication networks. So it runs on technology. So they are normally telephone and email contacts, that help people to communicate. These days, we can use Zoom a lot. So we can talk about Zoom. The virtual idea is becoming more and more predominant in this Corona era. If entities continue to grow, they will have to go through the phases of transformation. So talking about a virtual organization, right? It is operated by the means of IT systems and communication networks. That's how it runs. That's why I mentioned that it runs on technology, because someone can sit in, literally set up an organization online and outsource literally everything to a third party. So outsource delivery to a third party, outsource the people who pick the stock to a third party, literally everything. So there are people that run the organizations like that. The key to a successful virtual organization is the successful management of all the different external relationships and how to coordinate activities, because you depend on technology and maybe your outsourced staff sit in different parts of the world. You need to coordinate properly, and that's how you succeed as a virtual organization. So let's look at an example. It says, for example, a company that sells branded footwear could operate as a virtual company using its brand name as its major core competence. It could outsource all of its value chain, you see. If a branded footwear company can outsource all of its value chain and support activities, manufacturing, for example, could be outsourced to producers in developing countries. Warehousing the footwear could, you could use warehousing companies to hold the inventory. A network of self-employed sales representatives might be used to sell the footwear. So you can literally outsource all of your operations using the virtual organization model. So these self-employed sales representatives might be used to sell the footwear into retail organization. And marketing activities might be outsourced to an external agency. You see, so you can just employ people to run your business, and this is all coming from outsourcing. These are not necessarily your full-time employees, but you're outsourcing and you are getting people to work for you. Very, very key. Now let's talk about organizational structures. Now let's look at the matrix organizational structure. A matrix organizational structure. This is very, very important. You can't talk about culture without organizational structure. So a matrix organizational structure has been defined as any organization that employs a multiple command system. That includes not only a multiple command structure, but also related support mechanisms and an associated organizational culture and behavior pattern. So what you need to note here is that it's an organization that employs a multiple command system. Multiple command system. So what does this mean? What does this mean when we say multiple command system? What does this exactly mean? So let's give an example. A university, when in a university in which there is a traditional command structure based on heads of faculty and heads of departments. But in addition to this structure, there's also a course-based management structure in which individual lecturers are responsible for all aspects of a particular course or degree programs. You see? So that's a multiple command structure right there. So there's a traditional command structure, which is based on heads of faculty and co. And there's also a course-based management structure where people are managing courses or certain degree programs. So that's where the multiple command structure comes in. But you should also know that there are related support mechanisms. So there's a traditional command structure, and there's also kind of like an alternate or support command structure that run together. That's why it's called a matrix. A matrix. You have the project-based and team-based structures. So this is usually a structure where project teams are assembled to accomplish a specific task. So, for example, if you have a project, let's say a project to, design a new product, right? Bring a new product to the market. That's a specific task. Now we'll ask ourselves, who are the relevant people that need to come on board, right? So maybe the finance person who developed the model to understand whether the product will make profits will come on board. The marketing people will come on board. The engineering or the technology side of things who actually design the product will also come on board. So project teams are usually assembled to accomplish a specific task. And the project team should consist of members from different disciplines. So you bring people from different disciplines because you need a wide range of skills to implement the project. Very, very important. You need to know that project teams might be used for implementing planned strategic changes. Very key. Now let's talk about the functional organizational structures. Functional organizational structures. In a functional organizational structure, decision-making authority is delegated in a very formal arrangement, and responsibilities are divided between managers of different activities or functions. So in functional organizational structure, that's where a lot of organizations sit, where your organization is divided into functions, or sometimes people call it departments. So you see the finance function, you see the marketing function, you see the HR function, So decision-making authority is delegated in a very formal arrangement, and responsibilities are divided between the managers of different activities or functions. Typically, functions in a manufacturing entity include production, marketing, sales, finance, accounting, etc. So these are examples of the functions that we talked about. Now let's move on to divisional organizational structure. Divisional organizational structure. So when we say a division might simply be what we call a strategic business unit of the entity or the group. And each division would have its own functional departments. So each division can have its own functional departments like marketing, operations, finance, etc. So a division is simply an area of operations, which is defined by, number one, the different products that they engage in. Number two, the markets or the geographical location of the market, the geographical area of the market, and by the different customers. So a division, would have its own functions. It's like an entire strategic business unit on its own. So they might say so and so division, and that so and so division, it will have all the necessary functions or functional departments under it. Very, very key. Now let's talk about the conglomerate organizational structure. A conglomerate is an organizational structure consisting of two or more companies that operate in entirely different industries, right? But which are part of the same group. Which are part of the same group. So that's something to take note of. That's something very, very important to take note of. So when we talk about the conglomerate organizational structure, we are simply referring to two or more organizations that operate in different industries. They operate in totally different industries, right? Totally different industries, but are part of the same group. They are part of the same group. And so if you have something like, for example, there are companies that, or groups, or that's what we call group of companies, groups that are into furniture, they are into real estate, they are into telecommunication, all kinds of things. Typically, a conglomerate consists of a parent company and a number of subsidiary companies. So very, very important. So let's give an example. Maybe an example might help, So a conglomerate in the travel and leisure sector may consist of a parent company and 3 subsidiary companies, which may be an airline company, a hotel company, and a restaurant company. So you see, airline, one industry, hotel and restaurants to another industry. Sometimes it can even be more. There are people who are into real estate, they are into hospitality, they are into telecommunication, they are into, all kinds of things. The advantages of a conglomerate structure are that each subsidiary within the group can focus on its own special area of operations. So each subsidiary can focus on its own special area. So if it's telecommunication you're focusing on, you can focus on it easily. Adding new subsidiaries to the group in an acquisition or selling off businesses in a disposal is relatively straightforward. A lot of global companies also have a conglomerate structure. Now let's talk about centralization versus decentralization. What's the difference? What's the difference here? In a centralized organization, senior management retain most or all of the authority to make the important decisions. So all the important decisions, senior management retain most or all of the decision-making authority. In a decentralized organization, the decision-making authority is delegated to management of is delegated to lower level employees, to lower level management. Is delegated to the management of units at lower levels. So let me read what is here. In a decentralized organization, the authority to take major decisions is delegated to the management of units at lower levels in the organizational structure. So that's the difference. When it comes to centralized organization, decision-making authority is centered at the top, on senior management. In a decentralized organization, decision-making authority is delegated to lower level management. And what are the advantages of centralizations? Decisions by management are more likely to be taken with regard for the corporate entities, for the corporate objectives of the entity as a whole, because this decision is coming from senior management. It is argued that they might, understand the nitty-gritty of the corporate objectives, and so their decisions will align with the corporate objectives, And sometimes, so another advantage is that in a crisis situation, it is easier to make important decisions centrally. Because in the crisis situation, it's not now that you come to delegate to this person. So you need to take quick decisions fast, then you just move on. So that's an advantage of centralization. It's also easy. It's not necessarily easy, but it's faster than the decentralized model. What are the advantages of decentralization? Here we are talking about the devolution of authority. In many situations, the junior managers or the local managers have better knowledge. You underestimate, but they are on the ground. So they have better knowledge, more than senior management about the operational condition or the operational processes. And so because they have better knowledge, they might even take better decisions. That's the argument here. Also, when you give local management decision-making authority, it motivates them. They feel part of the organization. They feel like, they are part of the organization, and they are, they participate in the decision-making processes of the organization. Very, very important. Very, very important. So those are some of the advantages. Now, in our previous videos, we talked about the Grainer's growth model, and in the Grainer's growth model, one of the things we talked about that I wanted to highlight here is that's why I said it has already been suggested that as an entity gets larger, it might go through periods of centralization, decentralization, and then coordination between local management and the head office. So as organizations go through their phases of transformation, you see that they might start with centralization. Decisions will be taken solely at the senior management level. Then they begin to understand that, no, they need to include local managers, and so they decentralize. Then they also get to a point where they realize that coordination between local management and the head office is very critical. So that's the Grainer's growth model. It shows the growth processes or the transformation phases of an organization. Now, when we're talking about virtual organizations, right, we mentioned outsourcing. And so, I would like to explain what outsourcing is. And outsourcing is simply subcontracting work to a third party. It is very common to outsource non-core activities, such as the management of an entity's fleet of motor vehicles, security service, cleaning services, and sometimes some accountancy work like payroll. Payroll, for one, is usually outsourced. So what are the reasons for outsourcing? You outsource to, like I said, to subcontract non-core activities, because usually organizations will want to focus on their core activities. So for example, if somebody is in banking, they want to focus on banking and let someone take care of the security and the cleaning and all that. So it helps the organization to focus on its core activities in order to gain competitive advantage in that area. Very, very important. And sometimes organizations might require specialist skills that they might not necessarily have or cannot employ internally. And so they will need a third party to support in that area. So these are some of the reasons for outsourcing. But what are some of the problems when it comes to outsourcing? When you outsource, sometimes you cede your information to a third party, and so confidentiality is not necessarily there. So you need a trusted person. If you don't get a trusted person, it means you are giving out your company secrets to someone sometimes. So sometimes when you give your payroll out to someone, that's sensitive information. And so it can be a problem sometimes. Can be a problem sometimes. And when you're outsourced to, it's possible to lose control over the outsourced activities. So when something goes wrong, it can be terrible. It can be really, really terrible for you. So those are some of the problems with outsourcing. Now let's talk about Minspec. There's a guy called Minspec and his 5 building blocks for organizational configuration. Minspec and his 5 building blocks for organizational configurations. So let's explain. Minspec. So when we say organizational configuration, it's basically how the organization is set up, the structure of the organization. So Minspec argues that an organizational structure exists to coordinate the activities of different individuals and work processes, and so that we can implement plans into action. That's a fantastic explanation right there, because that's the purpose of an organizational structure, is to coordinate activities. The reason why there's a manager, there's a senior manager, then you move somewhere, is be able to coordinate activities so that we get things done. The nature of the organization structure varies with differences in processes and internal and external relationships. And so he says that there are 5 elements, and those 5 elements is what I want you to focus on here. Those 5 elements is what I want you. It says number 1, there's a strategic apex. Strategic apex. You are looking at the organizational structure, organizational configuration. Strategic apex, number 1. This is the top management in the organization. And we have the operating core. The operating core represents the basic work of the organization. So these are the operations, the operational people, and the individuals who carry out the work. Operational day-to-day staff sits here. They have the middle line. The middle line. Who are the middle line? These are managers. These are the managers and the management structure between the strategic apex and the operating core. So this represents the basic work of the organization and the individuals. These are the managers and the management structure between the strategic apex and the operating core. So the middle line comes between the strategic apex and the operating core. Very, very key. Then you have the support staff. These are the staff who provide support for the operating core. So these are people like the cleaning, repair and maintenance, and co. Secretarial staff all sits under the support staff. They also have technostructure. These are staff without direct line management responsibilities, right? And they produce procedures and system manuals that others are expected to follow. So these are staff with direct line management responsibilities, but who seek to standardize the way the organization works. So another definition or explanation for technostructure is that these are technical experts who have considerable control over the workings of an organization. So these are technically skilled people. That's why they call them technostructure. They are staff without direct line management responsibilities, but seeks to standardize the way the organization operates. So we've talked about the 5 building blocks for organizational configuration. These are the building blocks: strategic apex, operating core, middle line, support staff, and technostructure. Now let's talk about Minspec's 6 organizational configurations. 6 organizational configurations. Number 1, let's talk about the simple structure. The simple structure is found in startups or entrepreneurial companies. Here, the strategic apex exercises. Remember, we said the strategic apex is what's the top management. So they exercise direct control over the operating core, and there's no middle line. There's no middle line in such organizations. And there's also little or no support staff or technostructure. So the strategic apex here might be the owner or the director of the company. And it's a very, very flexible kind of structure and can react to changes quickly in the environment. So that's a simple structure. You know, the organizations that are very flat, very flat. You have the top management, you know, and then you have literally, you have the staff, basically. So the exercise direct control over the operating core, that's what it means. And there's no middle line. You don't see any middle line. There's also little or no support staff or technostructure. The beauty of this is they're able to react to changes quickly. Then you have the machine bureaucracy. In the machine bureaucracy, the technostructure, machine, so technostructure is the dominant element in the organization. The entity is controlled and regulated by a bureaucracy, you know, by a bureaucracy. And it is difficult for an entity with this type of organizational structure to react quickly to environmental change. So this type of organizational structure is suitable for a stable business environment. So machine bureaucracy, one of the things you need to think about is technostructure, and number two, the bureaucracy side of things. So the emphasis here is on control through regulation. You have the professional bureaucracy. In this type of structure, the operating core is the dominant element. Minspec, he gave the name professional bureaucracy to this type of structure because it is often found in entities where the operating core consists of highly skilled professional individuals, such as investment bankers, programmers in a software firm, etc. You know, so that's why they call it a professional bureaucracy, because it consists of highly skilled professional individuals. Here, the operating core is the dominant element. In the simple structure, the strategic apex is the dominant element. In the machine bureaucracy, the technostructure is the dominant element. The professional bureaucracy, the operating core is the dominant element. Then you have the divisionalized form. Divisionalized form. The divisionalized form, the middle line is the dominant element. There's a large group of powerful executive managers, and the organizational structure is a divisionalized structure, which is led by a divisional manager. You know, so in some divisionalized structures as well, divisional managers are very powerful. You know, divisional managers are very, very powerful. But here, what you need to know is that the middle line is the dominant element here. The middle line is the dominant element. They have the adhocracy. Adhocracy. This is an organization, you know, when the word ad hoc comes to mind, this is an organization with a complex and disordered structure and uses a lot of team-based and project-based work. And this type of structure helps in a very, very complex and dynamic business environment where innovation is essential. So if innovation is essential, you use adhocracy. These organizations might establish working relationships with external consultancies and experts. The support staff elements can therefore be very important. So in this, it's a very, very complex disordered structure. That's why it's called ad hoc, adhocracy. You know, when you say something is ad hoc, you know, that's exactly what it means. So they make extensive use of the team work and project-based work. So if you're an organization that thrives on innovation, this type of system will definitely work for you. And support staff elements can therefore be very important here. They have their missionary organization. In this type of organization, all the members share a common set of beliefs, missionary. So there's a common set of beliefs and values, and there's usually an unwillingness to compromise or accept change, you know. And this type of organization is only appropriate for small entities that operate in simple and fairly static business environments. So that's where we would bring our discussion to for today. And then in our next video, we'll be talking about evaluating strategic performance. I hope you're enjoying this lecture. Thank you. If you haven't subscribed to this channel, please do so. You're missing out. Please do so. Hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell, so that anytime I post a video, you'll be the first to get it. Thank you, and have a good day.